Hi, I'm Nick Holland. This is the House of Bronte. Now, I'm the author of 4 Bronte sisters biographies, but I'm also a big fan of history, of Tudor history and Stuart history, and I'm the author of a book called The Real Guy Fawkes. You may have seen me recently on the Channel 5 documentary, The Gunpowder Plot, Countdown to Treason. Now, I could talk for hours about the plot and about Guy Fawkes. Is a very complex subject. Don't worry, I'm not going to do that. We're just going to have a very brief look at the celebration of Bonfire Night, Guy Fawkes Night, in the time of the Brontes. We'll see if the Brontes knew who Guy Fawkes was, and we'll see if any of the Brontes wrote about Guy Fawkes. Now, spoiler alert, they did. Oh, this would be a very short video. So, what differentiates Guy Fawkes Night, Bonfire Night, 5th November, in the Brontes' time and today? Well, fireworks are a lot louder today, that's for sure, but they did have fireworks, as we'll see, in the Brontes' time, and they did have bonfires. Now, if you're, middle-aged, like I have to admit I am, you may remember bonfires were a very communal celebration. They still have some today, but not as many as they used to. But in the Brontes' time, the whole community used to go to bonfires. Every community had a bonfire because they had to. They legally had to. In the aftermath of the Gunpowder Plot in late 1605 and early 1606, government passed the Observation of 5th November 1605 Act, and that made it compulsory for every community to hold a bonfire, to hold a remembrance of the Gunpowder Plot, as a warning to people, as a reminder to people of how close the UK had come to tragedy, to these plotters blowing up King James and all the court and all the bishops. That's what Guy Fawkes wanted to do. They were doing it for the Catholic cause they believed in. They saw Catholics being repressed, and they wanted to fight back against that and put a new Catholic puppet monarch on the throne while they ruled. So that's the Gunpowder Plot in a nutshell, and we won't go more into the history of it, 'cause it's very complex. But you probably know they were foiled. At the very last moment, Fawkes was under the House of Lords, ready to light the gunpowder, and he was caught with just 7 or so hours until he lit the fuse and blew them all over the Scottish mountains, as he said when he was caught. So they were foiled just. So they came up with this act, the government at the time, to make people remember what had happened, how close the country had come to a terrorist atrocity. And they were still remembering it in the Brontes' time, in the 1820s, 30s and 40s, because it was still compulsory. The act wasn't repealed until 1859. So at the time of the Bronte sisters, each community would still hold a bonfire. They'd get together, they'd have fireworks, and they'd remember Guy Fawkes. Especially as Patrick Bronte, the Bronte's father, was the local vicar, the Church of England vicar. So he'd been really in charge of the celebrations, and the Brontes would have been there. So what celebrations have been like? Yep, certainly there would be a big bonfire. November in Yorkshire, in Haworth, is cold. The weather's not always reliable, but it's always cold. So a bonfire would be somewhere to warm yourselves around. There would have been food, maybe some drink in moderation, and there would definitely have been fireworks. Fireworks were still very popular then. They weren't as loud as they are today, but they didn't have the health and safety that we have today. And we know that from some reports at the time. So, for example, in Mould Green, which was a village in Huddersfield, we get the report of a young boy who, James Taylor, he was actually 17. He'd been attending a bonfire, and he'd done a rather foolish thing. According to the Bradford Observer, which was the Bronte's local newspaper, his pockets were filled with 4 dozen squibs and 2 ounces of gunpowder. It's not ideal when he's standing near a bonfire. A spark flew from the bonfire. Predictably catastrophic effects. I don't think James Taylor had any offspring. We'll leave it there. And James Taylor left it there. So be careful if you are attending any bonfires. Don't put gunpowder in your pocket. But also, we see today a bit of a dilemma. Is Guy Fawkes, is he a hero or is he a villain? People often say Guy Fawkes was the last person to enter Parliament with good intentions. He's become a bit of a hero. His face has become a symbol of rebellion, a V for Vendetta masks. And I think that was around as well. I think in the time of the Brontes, it was a time of social unrest. We see that in Charlotte's novel Shirley, for example. There was a lot of unrest amongst the working class. They wanted their situation in life to be better. They wanted more opportunities. And even then, bonfires could be a symbol of that. The image of Guy Fawkes and the gunpowder plotters could be a useful symbol to hang their rebellion onto. So, for example, in Wakefield, which again is in West Yorkshire, near Haworth, in 1849, a bonfire was almost banned. The city council tried to ban the bonfire because they were worried about people who'd be turning up there. Now, it was legally compelled to hold this bonfire, but they still tried to ban it. But the locals turned up. They wanted this bonfire, and there was a riot. The police were attacked. Apparently, Wakefield prison was broken into. Prisoners were freed, like a Bastille moment in Wakefield. A bystander was accused of being a police spy. There were police spies at the time. They tried to murder him. Perhaps most shocking of all, wow, the mayor of Wakefield was there. They knocked the mayor of Wakefield's hat off. Wow, that's a Guy Fawkes act. So Guy Fawkes could still be a symbol of rebellion. He could still be a catalyst for explosive actions and hats being knocked off. So what did the Brontes think about Guy Fawkes? Well, we get one reference to Guy Fawkes in Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. Now, I think possibly out of all the writing Brontes, Charlotte, Emily Bronte, Anne Bronte, Charlotte was a real stickler for the rules, for order in society. Anne was, I think, really into women's rights and people's rights. Emily was more of a free spirit, but Charlotte, that's putting it very simply, of course, but Charlotte was very much one who believed in the order of things and doing things the right way. But in Jane Eyre, we get an account of it. You might remember young Jane Eyre. She gets very ill-treated by her aunt and her family, and she gets sent to the haunted, she thinks, Red Room, horrible episode for her. And then eventually she gets sent to a very cruel school, which was based on Lowood School that Charlotte Bronte went to. But anyway, we'll go back to Jane Eyre. The young Jane Eyre has recovered from her Red Room ordeal. But she knows her aunt, Mrs. Reed, has been speaking about her. So Charlotte writes in Jane Eyre, Bessie, servant, Bessie invited him to walk into the breakfast room and led the way out. In the interview which followed between him and Mrs. Reed, I presume, from after occurrences, that the apothecary ventured to recommend my being sent to school. The apothecary is the he, the one that Mrs. Reed, Aunt Reed, is talking to. And he's ventured to recommend Jane Eyre being sent to school. So we'll get back to the story, Charlotte's words. And the recommendation was no doubt readily enough adopted. For, as Abbott said, in discussing the subject with Bessie when both sat sewing in the nursery one night after I was in bed, and, as they thought, asleep, Mrs. was, she dared say, glad enough to get rid of such a tiresome, ill-conditioned child, who always looked as if she were watching everybody and scheming plots underhand. Abbott, I think, gave me credit for being a sort of infantine Guy Fawkes. That's Charlotte's words. It's Jane Eyre's, young Jane Eyre's words. She's been accused of being a schemer. So what's the most famous schemer Charlotte can think of? Guy Fawkes. So even then, Guy Fawkes was a famous schemer. But of course, Jane Eyre wasn't really a schemer. She was being treated unfairly. So was Charlotte saying, maybe Guy Fawkes was being treated unfairly. But I can hear fireworks going off in the background, and that's the key for me to leave this short video on the Brontes and Guy Fawkes. And I'm going to go out with a sparkler soon and take it all in. But if you want to know more about Guy Fawkes, more about the gunpowder plot, you can read The Real Guy Fawkes. It's a fascinating story, if I say so myself. And if you want to know more about the Bronte sisters, please subscribe to this channel, like this video, share it, and come back for more House of Bronte videos and podcasts. Thank you.